The tribe God left out, according to Revelation 7. What if I told you that in the final moments of world history, when God seals 144,000 from the 12 tribes of Israel, one tribe is missing? It's not a typo. It's not forgotten by accident. God left one tribe out on purpose. 12 tribes are listed, but the tribe of Dan, gone. Nowhere to be found in Revelation 7. And the question is, why? And if God left out an entire tribe once, could it happen again? Let's go back to the beginning. Dan was one of the 12 sons of Jacob, who was renamed Israel. Dan's name means judge, and his descendants became the tribe of Dan, one of the 12 tribes of Israel. Now the sons of Jacob were 12. The sons of Leah were Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. The sons of Rachel were Joseph and Benjamin. The sons of Bilhah, Rachel's maidservant, were Dan and Naphtali. Genesis 35:23-25. The tribe of Dan was supposed to live near the Mediterranean Sea, but they had problems, fighting, people pushing back, and a choice that would change their future forever. They didn't like the land God gave them. So they went out to find a new place to live. In the book of Judges, we see one of the saddest stories in Israel's history. In those days, there was no king in Israel, and in those days, the tribe of the Danites was seeking an inheritance for itself to dwell in. Judges 18. Instead of standing strong and taking the land God gave them, the tribe of Dan sent out some men to spy up north, near where Lebanon is today. They found a group of people living in peace, and they destroyed them. They took the land, built a city, named it Dan, and then they did something really wrong. They started a fake religion. Then they set up for themselves the carved image, Judges 18:30. They made their own priests, their own statues, and their own way of worshiping. And it didn't end there. Years later, when the kingdom of Israel split in two, King Jeroboam I set up 2 golden calves, one in Bethel, the other in Dan. He set one up in Bethel, and the other he put in Dan, and this thing became a sin. 1 Kings 12, verses 29-30. Imagine that. A tribe chosen by God, now leading the nation in idol worship. Not only did Dan reject the land God gave them, they also rejected the God who gave it. And their legacy became one of rebellion, one of spiritual confusion. So is that why they're missing in Revelation? It might be. Now let's read the actual list in Revelation 7. Of the tribe of Judah, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Reuben, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Gad, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Asher, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Naphtali, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Manasseh, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Simeon, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Levi, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Issachar, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Zebulun, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Joseph, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Benjamin, 12,000 were sealed. Revelation 7:5, did you catch it? Dan is gone. And instead of Joseph being split into Ephraim and Manasseh, only Manasseh is mentioned. That's strange, because Ephraim too had a history of rebellion. Now let's really dig in. Revelation 7 doesn't tell us why Dan is missing. The Bible gives no direct explanation, but across Scripture and throughout church history, clues have been dropped. And when you put those clues together, something serious starts to form. There are 4 leading theories. Each one paints a different picture of what may have happened to Dan, and one of them may lead us straight to the Antichrist. Let's walk through each one carefully and see what we find. First, Dan was disqualified by idolatry. From the very beginning, the tribe of Dan had big problems. Then they set up for themselves the carved image. Judges 18:30. Dan didn't just mess up by accident, they chose sin on purpose. They didn't follow God's rules. Instead, they made their own idols, picked fake priests, and started their own kind of religion. Later on, during the time of King Jeroboam, Dan became a major place where idol worship happened. A golden calf was put there. The people were told, "These are your gods." This wasn't just one mistake. It became part of their story forever. Could it be that God left Dan out of the end-time seal because their sin was too serious? Could it be that God is warning us that idol worship has real consequences, even for our children and grandchildren? God is full of love, but He is also holy. And He doesn't ignore sin forever. Second, Dan, maybe the tribe of the Antichrist. This is the scariest idea. And it comes from some old prophecies that use mysterious words. In Genesis 49, Jacob was giving blessings to each of his sons before he died. When he got to Dan, he said, "Dan shall be a serpent by the way, a viper by the path, that bites the horse's heels so that its rider shall fall backward." Genesis 49:17. That doesn't sound like a kind blessing at all. Some early church leaders thought this verse was about the Antichrist, a powerful evil person who might come from the tribe of Dan and trick the whole world. Deuteronomy 33:22 makes it even more mysterious. Dan is a lion's whelp. He shall leap from Bashan. A lion's baby, hiding, waiting to jump. Again, those words sound scary, not safe. And in Jeremiah 8 verse 16, we read this: "The snorting of his horses was heard from Dan. The whole land trembled at the sound." Could the Antichrist rise from the tribe of Dan? We can't say for certain. But if God knew that Dan's lineage would give rise to the enemy of Christ, wouldn't it make sense that Dan would be excluded from the 144,000? This isn't a claim, it's a question, but it's one we can't afford to ignore. Third, Dan lost its identity. Another theory is simpler, but still sobering. Over time, Dan may have just disappeared. After centuries of war, invasion, and assimilation, the Danites may have blended into other cultures. Some scholars believe they intermarried with the Phoenicians, based on verses like, "The son of a woman of the daughters of Dan, and his father was a man of Tyre." 2 Chronicles 2:14. Others point out that by the time the Israelites returned from exile in Babylon, Dan is completely missing from the genealogies in 1 Chronicles 4-7. Out of 12 sons, Dan is skipped. Could this be why Dan is also skipped in Revelation? Not as a punishment, but simply because the tribe no longer exists as a distinct group. God doesn't lose track of people, but maybe Dan lost track of who they were meant to be. And when identity fades, so does assignment. Fourth, Dan faded by choice. This theory hits close to home. Maybe Dan wasn't erased by judgment. Maybe they walked away. Dan didn't like the land God gave them. They didn't want to fight the battles God called them to. So they moved. They found an easier place. And then they replaced God's worship with their own ideas. They set up for themselves the carved image all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh. Judges 18:31. They didn't just drift, they chose distance. And that's a warning to all of us. You can be called, you can be chosen, you can be part of the family. But if you walk away long enough, you might miss the moment you were made for. Here's what makes this all so important. God wrote Dan out of the list in Revelation 7. Not by mistake, not by accident, by divine decision. And what's most shocking is this: Reuben, who slept with his father's concubine; Manasseh, who came from Joseph's adopted line; even Levi, whose tribe led a rebellion at Sinai. They all made the list. Only Dan is missing. That means God is not afraid to redeem a messy past, but he also won't reward ongoing rebellion. There's a reason this hits hard. Because some of us are walking the same path. We've heard the truth. We've felt the call. We've been invited into God's purpose. And yet, we're still wandering, still doubting, still chasing our own thing. Dan's story isn't just about a lost tribe. It's about a lost opportunity. But here's the mercy. Dan comes back. In Ezekiel 48, when the kingdom of God is described in the future, Dan is the first tribe mentioned. He doesn't make the 144,000, but he still has a place in the kingdom. That's grace. So what does this mean for us? Can someone lose their assignment? Yes. But does God offer restoration? Absolutely. The question isn't, why did God leave out Dan? The real question is, will I stay faithful to what God gave me? Or will I walk away, like Dan did? Here's where things shift. Because even though Dan is missing in Revelation 7, he's not missing forever. If you go to Ezekiel 48, where the future millennial kingdom is described, guess which tribe is listed first? Dan? Now these are the names of the tribes from the north end. Dan shall have one portion. Ezekiel 48. 1. God didn't erase Dan. He didn't destroy the tribe completely. He simply left them out of the special end times mission. Why? Maybe to show us something powerful. Being called doesn't mean you won't be corrected. Dan was called, but Dan turned. And even though they won't serve as part of the 144,000, they still have a place in God's kingdom. That's mercy. The tribe of Dan is a warning, a story of what happens when you turn your back on truth, when you exchange worship for comfort, when you build your own religion instead of following God's. They were once chosen, but became excluded, not because God failed, but because they did. And yet, Dan is also a reminder of God's patience, because even though they fell, God still writes them back into his final plan. Here's what's most amazing. In today's world, no one can tell which tribe they're from. After the Jewish diaspora in AD 70, tribal identities were mostly lost, but God never forgot. The Lord knows those who are his, 2 Timothy 2:19. So when the time comes, and the 144,000 are sealed, God will know exactly who is from which tribe. Even if the world has forgotten, even if the records are gone, he keeps track. And the same is true for you. He knows your story, your name, your struggle. Even when you feel lost in the crowd, the act of sealing, as described in Revelation, signifies a divine mark of protection and ownership. This sealing process symbolizes a spiritual preservation during times of tribulation. Each of the 12 tribes of Israel contributes 12,000 members, signifying completeness in God's selection. The number 144,000 is rich in symbolism. In biblical numerology, 12 often represents divine authority, completeness, perfect governance. Multiplying 12 tribes by 12,000 members from each tribe suggests a magnified completeness. The sealing of the 144,000 is a sign of God's sovereignty and His ability to preserve His chosen ones in the midst chaos and destruction. This notion offers comfort to believers, assuring them of God's protection and the importance of faithfulness. Contrast with the mark of the beast. The seal of God and the mark of the beast from the book of Revelation show a big difference between good and evil, and between God's power and the power of the world. The seal of God, mentioned in Revelation 7, represents divine protection and ownership. It's given to God's faithful followers, marking them as His own in a spiritual sense. Unlike a physical mark, it symbolizes a deep, personal commitment to God and His teachings. Possessing the seal of God indicates a spiritual safeguarding during times of trial and judgment. It's a sign of being chosen by God, reflecting a life lived in accordance with divine principles. The mark of the beast talked about in Revelation 13 is a sign that shows loyalty to the beast, a bad character against God. It means turning away from God and choosing to follow the power of people in the world, which is often not right or good. The mark of the beast appears in Revelation. The mark of the beast is referred to as the mark of the beast because it is brought into being by a man who is referred to as the beast. According to the Bible passages in Revelation 16 and 19, the mark of the beast is a symbol that distinguishes those who worship the beast. Also, he compels all, the small and the great, and the rich and the poor, and the free men and the slaves, to be given a mark on their right hand or on their forehead signifying allegiance to the beast, and that no one will be able to buy or sell except the one who has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. Revelation 13, he causes all to receive a mark. A mark will be given to everyone under the government of the beast and his associate. This mark is necessary to participate in the economy, and those without it will not be able to buy or sell anything. Only those bearing a special number on a visible part of their body, hand or forehead, will be allowed to trade, and the number will only be marked on those who engage in imperial idolatry. The number 666 is the coded name of the dictator. We have already discussed its meaning, the nature of apocalyptic writing. Until he arrives, when his identity with this figure will be only too obvious, all attempts to decode it are useless speculation. One thing is clear, he will fall short of perfection, 7, in every regard. The word charagma in ancient Greek language refers to a mark, but it is not commonly associated with people. Thus, some interpret it as a symbolic mark. However, the idea of a physical mark being required for buying or selling is not impossible and could be practical. The technology to give people a mark that enables them to buy and sell in the electronic economy is available. There are many different ways it could happen, and such programs are proposed and tested constantly. A mark on their right hand or on their foreheads. Satan is not a creative being. All he can do is imitate God. We are not surprised to find that this too is a satanic parody of something God will do. It imitates God's mark upon his people. What is the spiritual state of the 144,000? God as individuals who keep the commandments of God. Revelation 12:17, Revelation 14:12. In the final chapter it is stated, "Blessed are those who follow his commandments, for they will have the right to the tree of life and may enter the city through its gates." Revelation 22:14.
Many seem to be confused because they do not understand the book of Revelation. However, What if there was an animation showing the entire book? Well, we created that. And to watch that, click here.